Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we explore the secret paths of Middle-earth and share the stories Tolkien never told. Before we dive in, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from and whether this tale has found you by day or by night. There are jewels in Middle-earth that should not exist. Stones that gleam with a light older than the sun. Gems that remember the world before shadow, before death, before the first mortal breath split the silence of creation. And among these radiant impossibilities, buried deep beneath the roots of the lonely mountain, there rested a jewel that defied explanation, a thing of such beauty that kings would betray their own blood to possess it, that dragons would coil around it for centuries, that even the humblest of hobbits would stand transfixed in its glow. The Dwarves called it the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, a relic beyond price, beyond craft, beyond understanding. But what was it, truly? Descend with me now into the black halls of Erebor, where the air tastes of ancient stone and the walls still hum with the memory of dragon fire. Picture the great vaults carved by Thrain the Old, chambers so vast that entire kingdoms could be swallowed within their depths. The dwarves who built these halls did not merely carve rock. They listened to the mountain's bones, followed veins of silver and gold like arteries, honored the stone as a living thing. And at the mountain's heart they found it, not forged, not cut, not shaped by any hand they recognized. It simply was. White fire flickered across its faceted surface, 1,000 colors born and dying in each crystalline plane. Some who gazed upon it swore they saw stars wheeling in its depths. Others claimed they glimpsed the reflection of their own desires, magnified until recognition became madness. The Arkenstone did not shine. It radiated, as if the light came not from without but from within, as if some fragment of the world's first dawn had been trapped inside this singular stone and could not escape. Thorin Oakenshield, rightful king under the mountain, heir to Durin's throne, descended into obsession over it. His mind fractured under its brilliance, his heart hardened, his hands trembled with need. Thranduil, ancient and cautious king of the woodland realm, who had witnessed millennia pass like seasons, felt old grief stir when he beheld even rumors of its existence. Bilbo Baggins, simple and decent, stood before it in wonder, and in that moment understood why wars are fought over beauty. How could one stone command such power? The answer, I promise you, lies not in sorcery or enchantment, not in curses or spells woven by dark lords in forgotten ages. The truth is older, stranger, and infinitely more terrible. The Arkenstone's corruption was not external. It was intrinsic. Woven into the very nature of what it was, what it remembered, and what it had witnessed before the world learned to weep. To understand the Arkenstone, we must journey deeper than Erebor, deeper than the mines of Moria, deeper than the roots of mountains, deeper than memory itself. We must return to the light that existed before the world opened its eyes. In the beginning, there was the void. Not darkness, for darkness is merely the absence of light, and light had not yet been conceived. The void was nothing, an eternal emptiness where even silence could not exist because there was no ear to hear it, no mind to perceive it. Into this absolute absence came Eru Ilúvatar, the One, the source of all thought and being. And from Ilúvatar's mind came the Aenir, beings of pure spirit, children of his thought, each embodying a fragment of his vast music. And then, in an act of creation that no mortal tongue can adequately describe, Ilúvatar commanded the Aenir to sing. Their voices wove together in harmonies of unimaginable complexity, each note a law of physics, each melody a principle of existence. Mountains rose from the mathematics of their song. Seas swelled from the rhythm of their chorus. And from the discord introduced by Melkor, the mightiest of the Aenir who desired to create rather than merely express. From that beautiful, terrible dissonance came conflict, change, growth, and ultimately the possibility of free will. When the music ended, Iluvatar gave it form. He made it real. And the Aenir beheld Arda. The world spread before them like a jewel in the darkness. But Arda was dark. The stars had not yet been kindled. The moon and sun did not exist. The world lay in shadow, beautiful and terrible and utterly lightless. To illuminate this newborn creation, the Valor, those Aenir who chose to enter the world and shape it, raised the two lamps. Iluin in the north and Ormel in the south, vast pillars of light that bathed the world in radiance. Until Melkor, who had become Morgoth, destroyed them. The world plunged into darkness once more. In response, the Valor Yavanna and Nienna sang into being the two trees of Valinor, Tulpirion the silver and Laurelin the golden, whose intertwined lights gave birth to the measurement of time itself, whose radiance surpassed anything that has existed since. And from the final flower of Tulpirion and the final fruit of Laurelin, when the trees were poisoned and slain by Morgoth and the great spider Ungoliant, the sun and moon were crafted, poor reflections of the original glory. But before the trees died, the greatest of the elven smiths, Feanor of the Noldor, captured their light in 3 jewels of his own making. The Silmarils, 3 perfect crystals containing the mingled radiance of Tulpirion and Laurelin, the last and only vessels of the light of Valinor in physical form. They were so beautiful that even the Valor marveled at them, so precious that Feanor's love for them twisted into possessiveness, then madness, then doom. His obsession with recovering them after Morgoth's theft drove him to rebellion, kinslaying, exile, and ultimately destruction. The Silmarils became objects of such desire that entire ages of the world turned upon their fate. Wars engulfed continents. Kingdoms fell. Thousands died. And why? Because they contained light, not merely physical illumination, but something deeper, something that touched the soul and awakened ancient memories of a world before corruption, before death, before shadow learned to crawl. Light in Tolkien's legendarium is never neutral. It is beauty, yes, but beauty that burns. It is truth, but truth that destroys those unworthy to bear it. It is memory made tangible, and memory, as any who have lived long know, can be the cruelest master of all. The Silmarils were eventually lost, one cast into the sky, one thrown into the sea, one swallowed by the earth. The 2 trees could not be rekindled. The lamps were rubble. The original lights of the world faded one by one into legend, then myth, then half-remembered dreams whispered by elves in their declining years. But what if fragments remained? What if, in the deep places of the world where stone remembers everything, where minerals grow slowly across millennia, where the bones of mountains still hum with the echoes of the music, what if there existed stones, natural formations, crystalline accidents, that had absorbed some infinitesimal fraction of that ancient radiance? What if the Arkenstone was such a thing? Not a Silmaril, not crafted by any hand, but a stone that had drunk deeply from the same metaphysical wellspring, that carried in its facets the ghost of the world's first light. If the Arkenstone remembered even the faintest echo of that primordial brilliance, if it held within its structure some crystallized remnant of the light that existed before corruption entered the world, then its power to ensnare, to obsess, to drive even the noblest hearts to madness was not a curse. It was simply its nature. For light, in Tolkien's cosmos, does not merely illuminate. it transforms. And transformation, unchecked and unwelcome, is indistinguishable from corruption. To understand why the Arkenstone held such terrible power over Thorin Oakenshield, we must first understand what it meant to be a dwarf. The dwarves were not part of Iluvatar's original design. They were not born from the music of the Aenir like elves and men. They were an anomaly, an act of love born from impatience. Alla the smith, the Vala who shaped mountains and delighted in crafting, grew weary of waiting for the children of Iluvatar to awaken. He desired students, companions who would share his passion for stone and metal, for craftsmanship and creation. So Alla fashioned the 7 fathers of the dwarves from the bones of the earth itself. He gave them strength to endure hardship, resilience to resist corruption, and an unquenchable fire for crafting beauty from raw material. But they were not truly alive, not yet. They were puppets animated by Alla's will, and when Iluvatar discovered this transgression, Alla prepared to destroy his creations in penance. But Iluvatar had mercy. He gave the dwarves true life, independent will, and souls of their own. Yet their origin left a mark. Dwarves were children of stone before they were children of the One. They did not fear the dark as men did, nor did they revere growing things as elves did. Their hearts beat in time with the deep rhythms of the earth. They heard music in the ring of hammer on anvil. They saw beauty in the perfect angle of a cut gem, the precise joining of metal, the enduring strength of a well-laid foundation. And they believed deeply, spiritually, that the greatest treasures were not merely objects but memories made tangible. A crown was not gold shaped into a circle. It was heritage, ancestry, legitimacy. A ring was not a band of metal. It was an oath made solid. A jewel was not a pretty stone. It was the crystallized essence of a people's history, their triumphs and tragedies compressed into facets that caught the light. This is why dwarves hoarded, not from greed, though greed could corrupt them as easily as any race, but from devotion. Every gem in a dwarf lord's treasury represented a link to the past, a thread connecting the present to ancestors long dead. To lose these treasures was not merely financial ruin. It was cultural annihilation, the severing of memory, the death of identity itself. And no treasure in all the histories of the dwarves carried more meaning than the Arkenstone. When Thror, king under the mountain, grandfather of Thorin, discovered it deep within Ereber's heart, he did not claim to have created it. The dwarves, master craftsmen who could cut gems into shapes that defied geometry, who could polish metal until it sang with light, even they admitted the Arkenstone surpassed their skill. It was, they said, cut by none. A gift from the mountain itself, perhaps formed in the world's youth, when stone was still molten and the earth's bones were soft. Perhaps shaped by pressures and temperatures that no forge could replicate. Perhaps, and this was spoken only in whispers, touched by something older and stranger than dwarvish craft. Thror declared it the symbol of his kingship, the heart of his realm, the soul of his people made visible. To possess the Arkenstone was to possess the legitimate right to rule. To lose it was unthinkable. Until Smaug came. The dragon descended on Ereber in fire and fury, slaughtering dwarves by the hundreds, devouring treasure by the ton, and claiming the lonely mountain as his own. Thror's people were scattered, exiled, reduced from proud lords of the greatest dwarven kingdom in Middle-earth to refugees wandering in shame. But it was not merely gold and jewels they had lost. They had lost their identity, their legitimacy, their heart. And Thorin Oakenshield, heir to that broken lineage, grew to manhood in exile, nursing a wound that could never close. He worked as a blacksmith in distant lands, earning his bread by the skill of his hands, a king reduced to a laborer. He watched his people diminish, saw proud craftsmen become beggars, witnessed the slow death of everything his ancestors had built. Is it any wonder, then, that the Arkenstone became an obsession? For Thorin, it was not a gem. It was vindication. Proof that he was still a king, that his people's suffering had meaning, that their exile could be reversed, that history could be rewritten in triumph rather than tragedy. The Arkenstone represented everything he had lost and everything he might yet reclaim. And that made him vulnerable. Because desire, when it crystallizes into need, becomes indistinguishable from madness. But the dwarves were not the only ones who knew the Arkenstone. The elves, too, had heard whispers of its existence, and those whispers troubled them. Elves do not perceive the world as mortals do. Their senses penetrate deeper, see further, remember longer. They can hear the grief in wind-blown trees and recognize the joy in sunlight breaking through clouds. Time moves differently for them. A century passes like a season, and they carry memories of ages long forgotten by younger races. And they remember light, not the pale light of the sun, which they tolerate but do not love, not the reflected light of the moon, which they honor but find melancholy. No, the elves remember starlight, the first light they ever saw when they awakened beside the waters of Cuivanen in the elder days. The stars were kindled by Varda, queen of the Valor, who scattered them across the heavens as a gift to the firstborn children of Iluvatar. Starlight does not burn. It does not reveal harshly. It illuminates gently, truthfully, without cruelty. And the elves have loved it ever since, woven it into their songs, their language, their very souls. But the Arkenstone's light was different. When Thranduil, king of the woodland realm, heard tales of a jewel in Erebor that shone with its own radiance, brighter than any star, he did not rejoice. He grew uneasy. He sent scouts to learn more, to glimpse it if they could, to discern its nature. What they reported disturbed him. The Arkenstone's light was not pure. It did not illuminate, it demanded. It did not reveal, it overwhelmed. Those who gazed upon it felt not peace, but hunger, not wonder, but need. And the elves, whose memories stretched back to the elder days, recognized the echo. They had seen such light before. In the Silmarils, which Feanor had crafted and Morgoth had stolen, which had driven elves to kinslaying and exile, which had burned the hands of the unworthy and brought ruin to all who coveted them. The Silmarils contain the light of the two trees, the most beautiful light ever to exist, and they had destroyed nearly everyone who touched them. Could the Arkenstone be a Silmaril, lost and rediscovered? No. The fate of the Silmarils was known. One was born into the sky by Eärendil, where it became the evening star. One was cast into the sea by Maglar, where it sank beyond recovery. One was swallowed by the earth when Medros threw himself into a fiery chasm, unable to bear its burning purity. The Arkenstone could not be a Silmaril, but it resonated with the same frequency. Thranduil, who was ancient even by elven standards, had lived through the wars of the First Age. He had seen what obsession with beautiful things could do to even the wisest and noblest hearts. He had watched kingdoms burn because someone desired a jewel more than they desired peace. And when he learned that Thorin Oakenshield sought to reclaim the Arkenstone, when he heard the fervor in the dwarf's voice and saw the madness beginning to take root, Thranduil understood. This would not end well. Because light, true light, ancient light, light that remembered the world before shadow, was not a blessing. It was a test, and most who faced it failed. The elves did not covet the Arkenstone. They feared it. They recognized in its glow the distant echo of sorrows they had thought long buried. They saw in its brilliance the reflection of old mistakes, old obsessions, old tragedies waiting to repeat themselves. And they wondered, what grief had been crystallized inside that stone? What memory of the elder days had been trapped within its facets, waiting for someone foolish enough to gaze too long into its depths? Starlight is gentle, but the Arkenstone's light was a scream frozen in crystal. Dragons are creatures of fire and shadow, born from Morgoth's malice in the ancient days when the world was still young and terrible. They are cunning, cruel, and patient beyond measure. They speak in riddles and lies, breath flame that can melt stone, and possess hides tougher than any armor forged by dwarf or elf. But their greatest power, the one that makes them truly dangerous, is not physical. It is their desire. Dragons do not merely want treasure, they need it. They hunger for it with an intensity that transcends rational thought. Gold and gems become obsessions, hoarded not for utility but for the pure, irrational ecstasy of possession. A dragon does not spend its wealth, does not trade it, does not even particularly admire it in any aesthetic sense. A dragon simply has it, and in that having, finds a satisfaction that borders on the metaphysical. But why? Tolkien never explains this fully, leaving it ambiguous and therefore more disturbing. But hints exist throughout his writings, suggestions that dragons are drawn to beautiful things because they themselves cannot create beauty. They are instruments of destruction, entropy given form, beings whose very existence is antithetical to growth, art, and life. And yet they recognize beauty when they see it. They covet what they cannot make. Smaug the Golden, last of the great fire drakes of the north, descended upon Erebor not because he needed the treasure. What use has a dragon for gold? But because he could not bear the thought of such wealth existing outside his control. The dwarves had crafted wonders beyond counting, necklaces of moonlight, crowns that sang when worn, armor that could turn any blade. Their halls glittered with the work of centuries, each piece a testament to dwarvish skill and devotion. Smaug destroyed them all. He killed the craftsmen, shattered their works, melted their finest creations into shapeless lumps. But the treasure, the raw gold, the unworked gems, those he kept. He piled them into a vast bed and lay upon it, feeling the cold metal against his scales, sinking into the wealth as if it were water. And at the center of his hoard, he placed the Arkenstone, not at the top where it might catch the eye, not displayed proudly as dwarves had done. No, Smaug buried it, deep within the gold, where only he knew its location. He would dig it out occasionally, turn it over in his claws, gaze into its depths with eyes that glowed like furnaces. What did he see there? Some say dragons, being creatures of fire, recognize in radiant gems a reflection of their own inner flame, and are drawn to things that mirror themselves. Others suggest that dragons, being immortal barring violence, accumulate such vast experiences over centuries that only the most extraordinary stimuli can penetrate their boredom. But I believe the truth is simpler and more terrible. The Arkenstone's light was old. Older than Smaug, older than dragonkind, older perhaps than the sun. And dragons, who are themselves echoes of an earlier, darker age, recognized in that ancient radiance something primal. The stone spoke to a part of Smaug that predated thought, that existed in the realm of pure instinct and elemental hunger. It was a challenge. Here was a light that did not fear him. A beauty that did not diminish in his presence. a thing of such concentrated existence that even a dragon, a living engine of destruction, could not erase it. And so Smaug cherished it above all else. Not out of love, for dragons do not love, but out of recognition. The Arkenstone was, in its way, as unnatural as Smaug himself. A jewel that should not exist, containing light that should have faded ages ago, remembering a world that had long since passed into myth. Dragon and stone were kindred, both remnants of earlier, stranger times, both possessing power that bent the world around them through sheer presence. When Bilbo Baggins crept into Smaug's lair, drawn by fate and Gandalf's machinations, and pocketed the Arkenstone with trembling hands, when Smaug awoke to find it missing, the dragon's rage was not merely about theft. It was about betrayal. The one thing in all his hoard that had seemed to understand him, that had matched his fire with its own inner radiance, stolen by a creature so insignificant that Smaug could have swallowed him in a single gulp. The dragon's fury was apocalyptic. He roared his wrath across the mountain, vowed vengeance, and descended upon Esgaroth to burn it to ash, all for a stone. Because the Arkenstone had done to Smaug what it did to everyone, reflected his deepest self back at him, magnified his desires, and transformed them into need. Even dragons, it seems, are not immune to the corruption of ancient light. Bilbo Baggins should never have been in Erebor. He was a hobbit of the Shire, a creature of comfort and routine, whose greatest ambition before Gandalf disrupted his life was to enjoy a second breakfast undisturbed. He was small, unwarlike, sensible, entirely unsuited for dragon slaying, treasure hunting, and quests into the deep places of the earth. And yet here he stood, in the heart of the lonely mountain, alone in the dragon's hoard, staring at the Arkenstone. Bilbo's first sight of it stopped his breath. He described it later in terms that were inadequate, almost childlike. A globe of white light, with colors shifting across its surface, beautiful beyond measure. But those who heard him tell the tale said it was not the words that conveyed the stone's nature. It was the look in his eyes, the distant, haunted expression of someone who had glimpsed something not meant for mortal sight. The Arkenstone called to him, not in words, for it was not enchanted in any traditional sense, but it pulled, like gravity, like inevitability. He felt a sudden, overwhelming certainty that he was meant to possess it, that his entire life had been a slow journey toward this moment, that every choice and chance had conspired to bring him to this place, this stone. And Bilbo, whose courage was always underestimated, whose wisdom was mistaken for timidity, whose quiet strength went unnoticed by flashier heroes, Bilbo recognized the feeling for what it was: temptation. Not the crude temptation of the One Ring, which promised power and domination. The Arkenstone's seduction was subtler. It whispered of significance, of being part of something greater, of mattering in a story that would outlive him. It offered not power but purpose, and purpose, to a hobbit who had spent his life as a footnote in other people's adventures, was intoxicating. But Bilbo Baggins had been raised well. His Took side gave him courage, yes, but his Baggins side gave him something just as valuable: restraint. The ability to recognize when something beautiful was also dangerous. The wisdom to step back from edges, even when curiosity beckoned. So Bilbo took the Arkenstone, but he did not keep it for himself. He carried it out of the mountain, yes. He hid it in his coat while Thorin raved and demanded its return. He held it close, felt its weight, marveled at its beauty. But when the moment came, when war threatened to tear apart fragile alliances, when Thorin's madness reached its peak, Bilbo surrendered it. He gave the Arkenstone to Bard and Thranduil, using it as a bargaining chip to force Thorin toward negotiation. And in doing so, Bilbo proved himself more resistant to the stone's corruption than any king, dragon, or ancient elf. Why? Not because hobbits are immune to temptation. The One Ring proved otherwise. But because the Arkenstone's particular form of corruption did not align with Bilbo's nature. It offered legacy, glory, a place in grand tales of kings and mountains. But Bilbo did not want glory. He wanted his armchair, his books, his garden, and perhaps, on particularly adventurous days, a good story to tell over tea. The Arkenstone could not give him what he truly desired. So its light slid off him like rain off a well-oiled coat, beautiful but ultimately irrelevant to his happiness. This, perhaps, is the stone's secret. It corrupts by reflection. It shows you what you most want and transforms that want into need. Thorin wanted legitimacy and restoration, so the stone became an obsession. Smaug wanted dominance over beauty, so the stone became a challenge. Thranduil saw ancient grief, so the stone became a warning. But Bilbo wanted breakfast, friends, and a quiet life. So the stone remained for him merely a very pretty rock. And that, more than any act of heroism or cleverness, was Bilbo Baggins' greatest achievement. He held in his hands something that had driven kings to madness and dragons to fury, and he was not moved. Not because he was strong, but because he was content. And contentment is the only armor that ancient light cannot pierce. Thorin Oakenshield descended into madness slowly, then all at once. At first, his insistence on finding the Arkenstone seemed reasonable. A king seeking his people's greatest treasure, a symbol of legitimacy reclaimed. His companions understood this. They had followed him across half of Middle-earth, fought spiders and goblins, endured hunger and cold, all to restore his kingdom. But after Smaug's death, when Erebor lay open and the treasure was theirs for the taking, something in Thorin began to fracture. He became obsessed with finding the stone. Every conversation returned to it. Every plan revolved around it. He tore through the horde like a man possessed, flinging aside priceless artifacts, kicking through mountains of gold, searching, always searching. When his companions suggested they secure the mountain first, negotiate with the gathering armies outside, attend to practical matters of defense and survival, Thorin raged at them. The Arkenstone was not a luxury. It was essential. Without it, he was not truly king. Without it, Erebor was not truly reclaimed. Without it, nothing they had accomplished mattered. This was not greed speaking. It was identity. Thorin had spent his entire adult life defined by loss. He was a king without a kingdom, a warrior without a home, an heir to a legacy of failure and exile. Every achievement of his ancestors had been stolen by Smaug, every glory reduced to ash and memory. He had worked with his own hands for his bread, fought in wars that were not his own, wandered in lands that did not welcome him. And now, finally, Erebor was his again. But was it? Could he truly call himself king under the mountain without the symbol that legitimized his rule? The Arkenstone was not merely a jewel, it was proof. Proof that he was worthy, that his suffering had meaning, that his people's long exile had not been in vain. Without it, he was still just Thorin the exile. With it, he became Thorin Oakenshield, true heir of Durin, king under the mountain, lord of the greatest treasure in Middle-earth. So he searched. And as he searched, the world around him began to narrow. He stopped seeing his companions as friends and began viewing them as potential thieves. He fortified the mountain, barring the gates, posting guards, trusting no one. When armies gathered outside, men seeking recompense for their losses, elves demanding payment for aid rendered, Thorin saw not legitimate claims, but greedy scavengers trying to steal what was rightfully his. His cousin Dane arrived with dwarvish reinforcements, and Thorin rejoiced, not at the reunion, not at the safety, but at the military strength to defend the horde. Every action, every thought, every emotion became filtered through a single question. How does this affect my claim to the Arkenstone? And when Bilbo confessed that he had taken it, that he had given it to Bard and Thranduil as a bargaining chip, Thorin's rage was nuclear. He did not merely shout. He did not merely banish Bilbo from the mountain, though he did both. No, something in Thorin broke. The last tether connecting him to rationality, to friendship, to the dwarf he had once been, snapped cleanly. He stood on the ramparts of Erebor, clad in ancient armor, surrounded by gold beyond measure, and he was utterly alone. Because the Arkenstone had shown him the truth about himself. He did not love his people. He loved his legacy. He did not value his companions. He valued their usefulness. He did not seek the stone for the good of his kingdom. He sought it because without it, he was nothing. And that terrifying void at the center of his identity could only be filled by the reflected glory of a jewel that had existed long before he was born and would endure long after he was dust. Feanor, creator of the Silmarils, had fallen into the same trap millennia earlier. He had loved his creations so intensely that when Morgoth stole them, Feanor's love curdled into obsession. He dragged his people into exile, led them into kinslaying, burned ships and bridges both literal and metaphorical, all to reclaim what was his. And in the end, he died alone, burned from within by the fire of his own spirit, achieving nothing but ruin. Thorin walked the same path. Not because the Arkenstone was cursed, but because it was a mirror. It reflected his deepest desires back at him with such clarity that he could no longer distinguish between wanting the stone and wanting to be whole. And mirrors, as any who have stared too long into their own eyes know, can drive you mad if you forget that reflections are not reality. It took war, the battle of 5 armies, blood spilled on stone, friends dying around him, to finally shatter the mirror's hold. Thorin, mortally wounded by Azog the Defiler, lay on the cold ground and saw clearly for the first time in weeks. The Arkenstone was gone. His kingdom was secure. His companions had survived. And he was dying. In those final moments, he called for Bilbo. He apologized for his madness, his cruelty, his blindness. He acknowledged that he had valued gold over friendship, pride over loyalty, a stone over the people who had loved him. And then Thorin Oakenshield, king under the mountain, died. The Arkenstone was placed upon his breast in the tomb, a symbol of his kingship and his doom, buried with him beneath Erebor's roots where no one would ever gaze upon it again. The stone had not killed him, but it had shown him the truth about himself, and that truth, in the end, was unbearable. There is a theory, whispered among lore masters and debated in dark libraries where old books gather dust, that the Arkenstone was not merely a jewel. It was a Silmaril. The logic is seductive. The Silmarils contain the light of the 2 trees, the most beautiful light ever to exist. One was cast into the sky, one into the sea, one into the earth. And where better for an earth-born Silmaril to come to rest than in the roots of the lonely mountain, where dwarves delving deep might eventually uncover it. The Arkenstone's brilliance, its ability to ensnare hearts, its aura of ancient significance, all echo the Silmaril's nature. Both were objects of obsessive desire. Both drove kings to madness. Both seemed to radiate not mere physical light, but something deeper, something that touched the soul. Could it be? The answer, I fear, is no. Not because the theory lacks elegance, it is beautiful in its symmetry. Not because it lacks supporting evidence, the parallels are striking. But because Tolkien himself, in his letters and later writings, accounted for all three Silmarils. Their fates were sealed, their stories complete. Eärendil bore one into the heavens, where it became the star that guided mariners and gave hope to those in darkness. This Silmaril's fate is observed nightly. It is the evening star, visible to any who look skyward. Maglar, last surviving son of Feanor, cast one into the sea in despair, unable to bear its burning purity. This Silmaril sank into depths beyond recovery, perhaps to rest eternally in Ulmo's domain, perhaps to be slowly dissolved by salt and time. Medros, Maglar's brother, threw himself into a fiery chasm clutching the third Silmaril, choosing death over a life of unbearable shame. The earth swallowed both Kinslayer and Jewel, and neither was ever seen again. 3 Silmarils, 3 fates, all accounted for. The Arkenstone, then, cannot be a Silmaril in literal truth. And yet, Tolkien was a master of resonance, of echo, of thematic recurrence. He built Middle-earth in layers, each age reflecting and reinteracting with those that came before. The same patterns repeat. Light corrupts, beauty ensnares, desire leads to doom. The same mistakes are made by different people in different ages because the fundamental nature of consciousness, its capacity for want, for need, for obsession, does not change. The Arkenstone is not a Silmaril, but it is a spiritual descendant. Tolkien intentionally crafted it to echo the Silmaril's nature, to awaken in readers' minds the memory of those earlier, greater tragedies. He wanted us to recognize the pattern, to see Thorin's madness and remember Feanor, to understand that the same poison flows through different vessels. So what was the Arkenstone truly? Not a Silmaril, not a work of craft, not enchanted by any wizard or cursed by any dark lord, but perhaps, and this is the theory I find most compelling, a natural Silmaril, a geological accident. A crystal formed in the deep places of the earth over unimaginable spans of time, subjected to pressures and temperatures that refined its structure to impossible perfection. And perhaps, in the ages when the world was young, when the light of the 2 trees still shone in Valinor, when the Silmarils blazed with captured radiance, perhaps some infinitesimal fraction of that light touched this stone. Perhaps it drank in, over millennia, a single ray of reflected glory. Perhaps it absorbed, molecule by molecule, the memory of the world's first dawn. Not enough to rival a true Silmaril, not enough to burn unworthy hands or command the attention of the Valar, but enough to remember, enough to radiate something older and stranger than mere beauty. Enough to drive those who gazed upon it to madness, not through enchantment, but through recognition, the soul's awareness that it stood before something that should not exist, something that predated shadow and would outlast all kingdoms. The Arkenstone corrupted not by design, but by nature. It was what it was. And what it was a fragment of the world's memory, made solid and faceted and beautiful. And memory, as the elves know better than any, is the cruelest treasure of all. Light, in Tolkien's cosmos, is not neutral. This is easy to forget, living as we do in a world where light is simply electromagnetic radiation, photons bouncing through space, carrying no moral weight beyond what we project onto it. We flip switches and banish darkness without thought, without consequence. But in Middle-earth, light is substance. It is not merely the absence of darkness. It is a positive force, a creative principle, a manifestation of Iluvatar's original thought. The first light came not from stars or sun, but from the music of the Aenir, and everything that followed, the lamps, the trees, the Silmarils, the sun and moon, were attempts to recapture or preserve that primordial radiance. And light, being substance, being real in a way that transcends physics, carries with it the history of its creation. The Arkenstone, I believe, was a stone that remembered light. Not because anyone told it to remember, not because it was crafted to remember, but because, at some point in the unimaginable depths of time, during ages when the world was still molten and new, this crystal absorbed a fraction of the light that illuminated creation's first dawn. Imagine it, a stone forming slowly in the dark beneath mountains, grain by grain accreting, atom by atom assembling into structure. And above, perhaps, a crack in the earth, a fissure through which, once in 1,000 years, a ray of starlight penetrated. Or perhaps, in even earlier ages, a glimmer of the two trees' radiance, reflected across seas, filtered through atmospheres, weakened to nearly nothing, but still faintly reaching. And the stone drank it in, over eons, over ages that dwarf mortal comprehension. A single photon at a time, perhaps, or even less, a quantum of ancient light embedding itself in crystalline structure, leaving the faintest imprint, the slightest alteration, until the stone became something more than geology. It became memory made solid, not conscious, not intelligent, but aware in the way that old places are aware, in the way that ancient forests feel different from young ones, in the way that standing stones hum with accumulated time. The Arkenstone did not enchant those who gazed upon it. It reminded them of what they could not say. Few who beheld it had any conscious memory of the elder days, of the light before shadow, of the world before corruption. But the soul remembers what the mind forgets. DNA carries ancestral memory. Consciousness echoes with experiences that predate individual existence. And when Thorin or Smaug or even Bilbo looked into the Arkenstone's depths, they saw not with eyes, but with something deeper, the ghost of the world as it was meant to be. Perfect, unspoiled, radiant. And the gap between that vision and reality, the distance between the world that might have been and the world that is, was unbearable. That was the Arkenstone's corruption, not a spell, not a curse. But longing weaponized, crystallized, made so intense that it bent the soul like gravity bends light. Those who gazed upon it saw their deepest desires reflected back at them, yes, but beneath that, they saw something older and more terrible. The truth that they were broken, that the world was broken, that something essential had been lost long ago and could never be recovered. That realization, for most, was too much to bear. So they tried to possess the stone, believing that if they could only hold it, if they could only keep it close, they might somehow reclaim that lost perfection, bridge the gap between memory and reality, heal the wound at the center of existence. But you cannot possess light. You can only witness it briefly, before it moves on, or before its brilliance burns away everything you thought you knew, leaving only ash and the terrible clarity of truth. Thorin Oakenshield died beneath the shadow of Erebor, the Arkenstone clasped to his breast, his last words an apology and a warning. Bard the Bowman, newly made Lord of Dale, had the stone delivered to the tomb, honoring the Dwarf King's final rest despite their bitter conflicts. It was buried with Thorin in the deep places beneath the mountain, sealed in stone, meant never again to see light. And there, the trail grows cold. Did the Arkenstone remain in Thorin's tomb? Was it truly sealed away, forgotten by the ages? Or did some later king, driven by curiosity or need, venture into the depths and bring it forth once more? The texts are silent. After the War of the Ring, after Sauron's fall and the departure of the elves, Middle-earth entered its final age, the Age of Men, where magic faded and the great powers withdrew. Erebor continued as a thriving kingdom under Dane Ironfoot and his descendants, but the old stories grew dim. The Arkenstone passed from history into legend, then from legend into rumor, and finally into silence. Some whisper that it still rests beneath the mountain, pulsing faintly in the dark, waiting. Others claim it was stolen centuries after Thorin's death, smuggled out by thieves who did not understand what they had taken, and that it now sits in some dark lord's treasury, or a dragon's hoard, or perhaps in the innocent home of a merchant who bought a pretty stone at market and has no idea that his new decoration remembers the light of creation. A few, very few, suggest something darker. They say the Arkenstone cannot be destroyed, cannot be forgotten, cannot be escaped. That it calls to those with the capacity for obsession, drawing them across miles and years, whispering in dreams, promising fulfillment that will never come. They say it has surfaced and vanished a dozen times throughout history, always bringing madness, always leaving ruin. They say it is still out there, waiting for the next king, the next dragon, the next fool who believes they can possess light without being burned. I do not know which version is true, but I know this: the Arkenstone was never the problem. We are the problem. Our need to possess beauty, to claim legacy, to fill the voids within ourselves with external treasures. This is the flaw that the Arkenstone exploited. The stone was simply what it was: ancient, radiant, indifferent. It did not seek to corrupt. It simply existed, and in existing, revealed the corruption already present in those who gazed upon it. Thorin did not fall because the Arkenstone was evil. He fell because he was already broken, and the stone's light illuminated every fracture in his soul until he could no longer ignore them. That is the true horror of the Arkenstone. Not that it corrupts, but that it reveals. It shows us who we truly are beneath the masks we wear, the stories we tell ourselves, the comfortable lies that let us sleep at night. And most of us, when confronted with that truth, cannot bear it. The Arkenstone was a mirror. And mirrors, as we all learn eventually, are the most dangerous objects in the world, not because they curse us, but because they refuse to lie. Some lights are not meant to be looked upon. Some truths are too bright to bear. And some treasures, no matter how beautiful, should remain buried in the deep places of the earth, where they can remember the world's first dawn in peace, without the burden of mortal eyes and desperate hearts. The Arkenstone taught us this, in the blood of Thorin Oakenshield and the ashes of kingdoms built on desire. It taught us that light can burn as surely as fire, and that the most dangerous corruption is not the one imposed from without, but the one we carry within. The hunger that whispers, "If only I possessed this, I would be whole." Because we will never be whole. Not through jewels, not through kingdoms, not through any external treasure. We can only be what we are, flawed, finite, and haunted by memories of a perfection we never actually knew, but which somehow we have never stopped mourning. The Arkenstone is gone now, one way or another, but the lesson remains. And in the deep places of the world, where stone remembers everything, perhaps the mountain still breathes in shadow and waits for the next seeker of light to descend into its heart. Perhaps it will wait forever. Or perhaps, Somewhere in the dark, the Arkenstone is already calling, and someone somewhere is beginning to listen. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.